Hey, it's time to finish up our first proving ground number 1. And what we're going to do is just remember, this was in many ways, the most basic compositing we've done, because we just took assignment 1 and put assignment 2 into it, right? But we had so many options within that to make it match that we really made a big difference from this, where we started today, to this, right? And one of the final steps, which to me is like the secret weapon, is blending it in with what are called texture overlays. And I probably overdid it a little bit. I'll take the opacity down. But that really helps like all the colors to match, helps the overall atmosphere to feel right, as well as kind of softening the background and erasing it away from the foreground so things become sharper. So let me review how to do that texture overlay. You'll notice the only 2 things I have a landscape, I have my creature, and then I brought in these big clouds from Pixabay. But if I wanted to texture overlay with something else like rainbows, I could find those on Pixabay, download them. See what else we've got to go with the clouds. Here's another rainbow, but with the bird, but I'm not going to use that bird part, right? And then here's a sharper rainbow. So you can texture overlay a lot and be really selective about it. Okay, now when I go back here, I'm going to put into my Proving Ground number 1 folder from downloads those different rainbow sources. And they're just like other compositing references, except I'm going to use these as texture overlays, which means I'm not going to use them at 100% opacity. I'm just using them for an overall texture fill. So let's start with the sharp rainbow. So if I bring that on, I bring it on top of everything, I am going to stretch it so it's quite large, so that it covers up my entire frame, right? Because I don't want to have an arbitrary hard edge in the texture overlay. That would be bad. That's like if you're glazing an oil painting and you accidentally left like a stencil on it, right? Okay, next I'm going to rasterize it so I can mess with it. And I'm going to take the opacity way down and see how it affects it. So you can see the rainbow and that kind of cloudiness it gives. And you decide how much do you want it to affect it. It's kind of like a lens flare. Now at this point, this is interesting. I can actually push this down below the other texture. And I can push it back into the background of my landscape. Do you see how effective that is? Right? Just pushing this texture overlay into the background. So I know I want it at least there, like maybe going up to Olympus. Oops, wrong one. I have it on auto select layer. I'm going to turn that off because texture overlays, of course, they fill up a whole lot. So I have it way back here, and it really changes the sky in a way I kind of like. Now, how can I get that rainbow to show up more? Well, I can stretch it, Command T, so that that rainbow is more visible in the sky. Boom, like that. And sure enough, it's like hitting right on Mount Olympus and that pinnacle. I can move it anywhere I want, right? But it's nice that it's behind rather than in front of my creature. Or I can move it in front of the middle ground, and that's kind of nice. But maybe I want it just about there, but I want to erase it out from the bottom up. So I'm going to use this really big soft-edged eraser, and I'm going to really blend it. But what was nice about it there, which I'll use a different layer for, is it helped highlight my creature by brightening behind my creature. You see that? So without it, you can see how much of a difference that made. It kind of gradates it. So it's brightest at the top and then sharper at the bottom. And I still have this texture overlay over everything. So these are all kind of bringing everything together. Now let's bring in another one. Again, at the very top. I'm going to bring in this one. Then I'm going to widen it. Right. Very, very strong. Where is it? It's way down here. Let's bring it on top of everything. And then just take its opacity way down. Other things you can do, besides using them at normal mode, is you can try a different blending mode, right? So like overlay, which is often a way they're meant to be used, right? Or soft light, or pin light, which prioritizes for texture. And you can kind of see now how there's like an echo rainbow moving through everything. And I can decide if that helps the believability or not of the scene. And if I wanted to change its colors, I could rasterize it, and I could play with something like hue saturation on it, and I can really shift that kind of lens flare spectrum. It's a little bit of just like an echo rainbow that's showing. And then, of course, I can always push it down into the background. I'm trying to decide where it's most helpful. Probably about there. Yeah, so I like it right there. All right. Now if I look at the other one, I just want to erase this out now, where the rainbow is showing on the mountain, because that's not how rainbows work. So the more you use, the more you have to kind of work with it. But it doesn't take much to dial it in to where it really is helping. And you want to just think it's better with it than without it. Okay, next. I have one final one. And this is one with a bird in it. So how can I hide that bird? Well, I can just put it at the base and then have it lower, but this is it on top of everything, right? I could also just stretch it, Command T, so that the birds aren't on it at all. It still works beautifully as a texture overlay. I'm just going to rasterize it, and because I'm making these things so big, that's Photoshop having to remember a whole lot of pixels, so I'm going to hit crop and then crop it. And then I can play with the opacity, but maybe just a blending mode too. And it will demo it for me. Like overlay mode. Right? You see how it kind of warms everything. And then I can decide what's the opacity that's nice for that. Maybe about there. Yeah, it's nice. And then do I put it underneath? Yeah, just a little bit. No, actually, it can be on top of everything. All right, so now I'm happy with it. So those are our texture overlays. Ways to make everything more believable. Now I save it, and I save a copy. I've already saved it as a PSD. It's my Proving Ground 1 in my Proving Ground folder. Now I save it as a copy, and I save it as a JPEG. And when I hit save, it will show me how big it is. And I want it to be close to 5 megabytes, but not over. So I'm going to do it at a quality of 9, so it's at 4.5 megabytes. I just try not to post anything larger than 5 megabytes to Canvas if I can help it, because we have Canvas memory limits. Okay, now I make sure I know where that went. And it went right here. So this is my Proving Ground. And if I compare that to assignment 1 that I turned in, and that JPEG, you'll see how there's a lot more depth in my proving ground because of those texture overlays and because of thinking about this little shading and the lighting. And maybe I'll want to resubmit my landscape assignment because it's really nice to have that rainbow going right over Olympus. But let's get it submitted into Canvas first. Today is the due date for it. So I go to my Canvas homepage, and I go to assignments to shortcut to it. I believe this is Unit 6. It's the end of Unit 6. But we go right to Proving Ground 1 and where we post our creature and our landscape. And then I scroll down. Here, I'll get the sidebar back. Okay, scroll down. I find my original post that I haven't started yet, right? It's good to see the posts. And I'm going to hit reply, and I start with my name. My instructor example. And I vary on this one because the rubrics are different. So I'm going to say rubric requirement number 2. Remember, I don't get to write these rubrics for these badge earning proving grounds. So rubric requirement 2, I'll underline it. I go up to the rubric to see what it is. It is recognizing commonalities among seemingly unrelated situations. Did you place your PNG creature file onto a landscape background image in a way that utilized a common light direction and accommodated for the angle of your creature's anatomy? It's pretty specific. That is the image. That is what you show through your proving ground JPEG image. But that's only one of 3 rubric requirements. But the rest are easy compared to doing all of that raster pixel wrangling. Then I shrink it. Next, I'm going to do rubric requirement number 1, which is really easy once you're finished. So once you posted it, what is rubric requirement number 1? It is make sense of your data. Did you accurately identify the resolution in pixels per inch and physical format, also known as print size, while identifying which of the 2 main types of digital art resolution your creaturescape is sized for? Whew. So, you'll see that here, kind of, but you'll see it in the past examples, and you'll now see it in my example. How do you fulfill that requirement? You do it by doing exactly what it says. You have to identify your information. So you go to image size, and you see how many inches it is. It's always going to be width first. So mine, and I'm going to make a note of it, it is 14 inches, 14.43 inches by 20.77 inches. At what resolution? At 300 pixels per inch. That's just what mine is. Yours might be very different. Then I ask myself the question, is that bigger than 8 by 10 inches at 300 pixels per inch? It's a pretty easy question because 14 by 20 is bigger than 8 by 10, right? So then I put that down. I'll give you both scenarios though. So 14.43 inches, which you use double quotations for, by X, 20.77 inches at 300, which is the standard print resolution, pixels per inch. So now I've shown the physical inches and the resolution, but I have to label it. I have to identify which one of the 2 main types of digital art resolution this is good for, and this is good for standard print resolution. So I need to label it. That's a requirement. You can't get full credit for that part of the rubric without it. Now, what if my image wasn't larger than 8 by 10 by 300? It's fine, it can still get full credit, but you need to label it correctly. So I'm going to save this for now. I'll come back to it. But let's pretend my image, because I've saved this, it's all good. I'm going to go to image size, and I'm going to check resample, which allows me to change it. And I'm going to change it so that it's only 4 inches wide at 300 pixels per inch. And if it's only 4 by 5 at 300, is that larger than 8 by 10 by 300? No, it's not. So now I can't say 4 by 5 at 300 print resolution.